Good afternoon, everyone. Virgotriad here. It is April 25th, 2019, and I made a promise to a gentleman by the name of Michael Sullivan who left a comment yesterday and very respectfully made some points that I would like to talk with you guys about now. I told Michael that I would be making this video in order to address some of his concerns with regards to the national debt and some of the information that he has that I think may be short in terms of what's actually factual. So I'm going to go through this and just, kind of go over things to make sure that everybody understands where and what the economy does for the country and why certain things like debt are actually more important than you might realize. So I'm going to start out by reading the comment, and then I will address each individual point. It says, "Hi, I listened to your whole video, and much, if not all, is valid. We are on the same side. I think in the desire to be objective, we must recognize that, us, the USA, are broke in a fundamental sense. We have a heck of a lot of debt, and that if it was called in overnight, would be a pickle. I observe that fiat currency is in fact based on faith alone, and that it is also a pickle between nation states, and much has become a stare down. I think it is reasonable and valid to comprehend that each citizen of nation state X is ultimately responsible for debt Y. That scares the shit out of me. I see war as the only response for demands for payment of debt given this dynamic. Any and all tell me why I'm wrong. I want to be wrong on this. I comprehend the valuing of people as components of a nation state because I understand that the ultimate value of a given currency is the meaningfulness of that currency to a critical population capable of key things. Stupid nation states with stupid people will have worthless currency. Now, all that said, and admitting we are in debt, I proceed to get lost in the clusterfuck that sovereign citizens evolve into. They are very legitimate concerns, but those concerns don't justify the bullshit they put on our police officers. Thank you for your comment, Michael, and thank you most of all for remaining totally respectful when stating your opinion. Unfortunately, some of the things that you've stated here aren't all completely in factual don't all have a completely factual basis, and that which doesn't seem to be totally complete. So I'm going to help you a little bit here with things that I see could potentially be raising fear for you that actually shouldn't be. So I'm going to take this first statement here. I think in the desire to be objective, we must recognize that, we, us, the United States, are broke in a fundamental sense. We have a heck of a lot of debt, and if it was called in overnight, would be a pickle. Well, the first thing I think here that disturbs me, Michael, is the fact that you feel that there would be any possibility that debt could be called in overnight. Number one, we have a lot of debt, but we also have agreements for all of that debt, meaning that there are two sides to the equation here. There's the debt side and there's the credit side. Okay. In order to do business with a bank, for example, a citizen, a person who's borrowing money from a bank, has a security agreement with that bank, or at the very least, a promissory note with that bank, meaning that there is a structured, scheduled time frame that the individual who takes the position of the debtor, the person getting the money that's being lent, is required to pay those payments back. Along with those payments, to make it something that's a positive thing for the bank or the creditor, comes a percentage of interest. Interest is amortized over the time frame, the span that the person is going to pay back the loan. Within that scheduled time, that person, as the debtor, makes their payments, and as long as they're making their payments on time, there is no issue. Loans that are collateralized when they fall into default can have a lien placed on them and be taken as repossession. But likewise, there are loans that are just based on your signature. And if you were to default on that loan because there is no collateral behind it, the chances of you losing something because of it are a lot more slim. And as a matter of fact, most people that default on a signature loan, and this is why they're harder to get too, actually end up losing virtually nothing but their credit score. That's not to say that the bank can't take you to court and have an actual judgment placed on you. But in reality, we don't have debtor's prison anymore. And the truth is, the majority of time, it's just going to screw up your credit. The United States is a country that is looked up to. Our fiat currency, as you call it, is actually the world currency. A lot of business that's done with the United States is done uncollateralized. But even if it weren't, it really wouldn't matter, because we have agreements with other foreign countries that are exactly the same type of agreements that you as a citizen would have with the bank. There are two different things that cannot occur when you're dealing with someone that has an account with a bank that has a contract. One of those things is for them to call in the full loan without you being in default. Their end of the agreement requires them to maintain continuing to take payments until the end of the loan. The same thing is largely true of the contracts between the United States and foreign countries. That is, that they can't simply call in a loan due overnight. The other point to this is that largely what is actually owed is owed to its own taxpayers, because we are the people who support the majority of the United States. If you're worrying about foreign entities like China, for example, owning a portion of the United States, overall, they actually own less than 20%. And, once again, those contracts stand. Also, with your statements with regards to being able to have them hand over citizens or hand over land and citizens, the only land is federal land that would be used as collateral, not private land or citizens, simply federal land. And that's if it needs to be collateralized at all, which largely is not what happens anymore. There are countries that are clawing to try to actually invest in the United States. I don't think that you understand thoroughly how the economic world works. See, it's good business to have debt a lot of the time. This happens to be one of them. Negative debt, like you're thinking about, is individual and personal debt when you're over your head. The United States isn't over their head. Their payments can be negotiated, renegotiated, and currently they have a AAA credit rating. There's a reason for that. It's because they don't default. And without a default, and it would have to be a serious one, nothing's going to get called in overnight. I observe that fiat currency is in fact based on faith alone. Michael, that's simply not true. Fiat currency is actually, the US dollar is actually the world currency. Yes, it is. It's the world currency. In addition to that, it isn't based on faith alone. It's based on securities and interest. It's based on investments. Something that you can take a look at is treasurydirect.org. That will give you the actual auction block of where securities for the United States government are sold. And as I told you before, largely Americans are who owns them. If you look at what a bond is as a financial instrument, you'll see how they work in order to keep the American economy going and flowing well. Regardless of what the national debt is, it's not a representative of us being broke in a fundamental sense. You state that you feel that the currency is based on faith alone, and I'm assuming that the reason that you feel that way is because you think for some reason that since we're no longer on the gold and silver standard, that there is no basis behind this fiat money other than it's what the Federal Reserve says we need to be using. First of all, I've already covered the point that it's not based on faith alone. It's based on investment and securities, and strong ones at that. But let me give you a little bit of a history lesson as to the reason why the gold standard was taken away in the first place. See, you making statements as you did in the first paragraph about being fundamentally broke because we have a heck of a lot of debt, and if it were called in overnight, that would be a pickle, is exactly what the concern was when the gold standard was removed. Because if they demanded payment in all gold and silver, the United States could potentially run out of reserves immediately, right away. Instead of, at the time, there was not a fiat currency. So instead of them running out of gold or running into the potential of at some point running out of gold, they decided that they wanted to use a different form of currency. This way, there would not be the issue with that happening and there not being enough gold and silver to go around. Now, if you think about that, the main reason why gold and silver were actually considered a currency at all was simply because they were a mineral that was agreed upon to be valuable. Largely is true of anything. We could decide boxes of baking soda are the only thing that is currency now. Of course, everybody would have to agree with it, as they have the US dollar. Federal Reserve notes just gave a way to ensure that all of the gold and silver didn't end up going missing to somewhere and wasn't able to be used as any other type of commodity. Sooner or later, the supplies were going to run out. We didn't want them running out and completely and totally going to other countries. There's more to it, but I think that's enough for now. I mean, the bottom line is it was the smartest thing to do. And in reality, the US dollar becoming the world currency is a huge deal for us. I think you'd agree. Admitting that we are in debt is not a problem. We are in debt. But whether it's a good or bad debt, it's not one that's going to create a war for us. Well, not unless a bunch of our own citizens actually misunderstand to the point that they start a revolution because they're not aware of the reality of what the economy is and needs to be in order to run smoothly. Underneath the description of this video, I'm going to include an actual article that is something I feel that needs to be read. It will explain why the national debt is not nearly as scary as people think it is. It's actually a Scholars Strategy Network article. It's on scholars.org. And the heading of it is Why There Is Nothing Scary About the U.S. National Debt. Granted, it was written in 2013, but it's still very valuable information. I also want to mention that your last statement here deserves to have a little bit of additional information added to it. And that is, the place for an argument is not the roadside, rather the courtroom. And also, that there are legitimate concerns, but those concerns don't justify the bullshit they pull on our police officers. You're speaking of the sovereign citizens that you see in videos like Scam Stingers and Van Balen's channel. The problem with this, Michael, is that not all sovereign citizens, Moors, Freemen on the Land, Constitutionalists, all of the people that we mention in the sovereign citizen movement, or the patriot movement for that matter, they're not all about just giving police officers a hard time. These people will give anybody a hard time or threaten or terrorize people that simply don't agree with their ideology. For example, you may have heard very recently, I myself have had some serious death threats. There's been a bogus arrest warrant that's been placed out by a group that is pretending to be part of the government. They've spread it all over the internet in an attempt to try to discredit any factual evidence that I can provide. In addition to that, people that have been in the past a part of these movements have largely been domestic terrorists. We are not talking about a group of people who just like to harass police on the side of the road. We are talking about people who like to put million-dollar liens on judges just because they don't agree with what the law actually states. People that have placed liens on police officers who ended up having to sell their homes because it took them years to get those falsified liens taken off of them. These are a group of people that like to clog up our court systems with bogus documentation. They like to threaten and terrorize women. They like to claim white supremacy. And they like to do things like squat in homes that don't belong to them. I had a few articles that I was going to go over with you guys, as a matter of fact, with regards to these squatters and the sovereign citizen and Moorish movement. There was actually a neighbor that I had who went on vacation and ended up having part of the Moorish temple movement end up showing up in her home, and it took her 3 months to get her home back. All she was on a week-long cruise. This is a serious problem in the nation. And these people are not just spreading false information. They're not just doing financial scams, although those are certainly bad enough. They're recruiting people into their movement by making them angry with false facts. And they never correct those facts. And then those people begin to tell other people. And we have a movement now that is based on lies, misinformation, and lack of education. It's embarrassing, quite frankly. I hope everybody takes the time to actually take a look at this article that I'm going to link in the description below this video. I want to thank Michael Sullivan one more time for posting this. I hope I've answered some of your questions. And if I didn't answer them completely, please feel free to comment in the section below this video, and I will do my level best to answer any additional questions that you have. I hope everybody has a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.